Understanding contract categories in real estate transactions. In the previous chapter, we focused on the foundations of enforceable contracts, including mutual agreement, drafting integrity, and the requirements necessary for contract validity. Now that we understand how contracts are created, the next step is understanding how the law classifies different types of contracts. Contract classification is important because not every agreement carries the same legal weight. Some contracts are fully enforceable, while others may be partially enforceable, voidable by one party, or completely invalid under the law. Courts use these classifications to determine whether a contract should be enforced, modified, or canceled. For real estate professionals, understanding these classifications is critical because transactions often involve complex negotiations, contingency clauses, and changing circumstances. Recognizing the legal status of a contract helps licensees guide their clients through negotiations and avoid misunderstandings about the enforceability of agreements. 4 primary contract classifications. Contract law generally recognizes 4 primary classifications of contracts based on their legal status and enforceability. These classifications determine whether a contract can be enforced in court and what legal remedies may be available if the agreement is breached. Valid contract. A contract that contains all required legal elements and is fully enforceable by law. Void contract. A contract that is not legally enforceable from the beginning because it involves an illegal act or lacks essential elements. Voidable contract. A contract that is legally valid but may be canceled by one of the parties due to certain legal defects. Unenforceable contract. A contract that is valid in principle but cannot be enforced due to legal technicalities, such as failing to meet writing requirements. Each of these classifications plays a unique role in determining how the law treats contractual agreements in real estate transactions. Valid contracts. A valid contract is one that satisfies all the legal requirements necessary for enforceability. These requirements include mutual agreement, consideration, competent parties, legal purpose, and intent to create legal obligations. In a typical real estate transaction, a valid contract occurs when a buyer submits a written offer to purchase property. The seller accepts the offer without modification, and both parties have the legal capacity and authority to enter into the agreement. Once a valid contract is formed, both parties are legally obligated to perform according to the terms of the agreement. If either party fails to perform, the injured party may pursue legal remedies such as damages or specific performance. Void contracts. A void contract is a contract that has no legal effect from the moment it is created. Courts treat void contracts as though they never existed because they violate fundamental legal principles. One common example of a void contract is an agreement involving illegal activities. For instance, if 2 parties attempt to create a contract to transfer property in order to hide assets from creditors or commit fraud, the agreement would be considered void. Another example may involve a contract entered into by someone who has been legally declared incompetent by a court. Because the individual lacks the legal capacity to enter into contracts, the agreement may be treated as void from the beginning. Since void contracts are considered invalid from their inception, courts will not enforce them under any circumstances. Voidable contracts. A voidable contract is a contract that is legally valid but may be canceled by one of the parties due to certain legal issues. Unlike a void contract, which has no legal effect, a voidable contract remains valid unless the affected party chooses to rescind it. Voidable contracts commonly arise in situations involving duress, fraud, misrepresentation, or undue influence. For example, if a buyer is pressured into signing a contract through threats or coercion, the buyer may have the legal right to cancel the agreement. Similarly, if one party intentionally misrepresents important information about the property, the injured party may have the option to rescind the contract or pursue damages. Until the injured party chooses to cancel the agreement, a voidable contract remains legally enforceable. Unenforceable contracts. An unenforceable contract is a contract that may contain all the essential elements of a valid agreement but cannot be enforced due to a legal technicality. One of the most common examples in real estate involves the statute of frauds, which requires certain contracts to be in writing in order to be enforceable. In Arizona, contracts for the sale of real property must be documented in writing under ARS, paragraph 44-101. If 2 parties verbally agree to sell a home but fail to create a written agreement, the contract may be considered unenforceable because it does not satisfy the writing requirement of the statute of frauds. Another example may involve situations where the statute of limitations has expired. Even though the contract may have been valid originally, the law may prevent enforcement after a certain period of time has passed. Legal implications of each contract category. Understanding the legal classification of contracts helps determine what rights and remedies are available when disputes arise. A valid contract creates binding obligations that courts will enforce if necessary. If one party breaches the agreement, the other party may seek remedies such as damages or specific performance. A void contract has no legal effect and cannot be enforced by either party. Courts simply treat the agreement as though it never existed. A voidable contract allows one party to cancel the agreement if certain legal defects are present. If the injured party chooses to proceed with the transaction despite the defect, the contract may remain valid. An unenforceable contract may contain the elements of a valid agreement but cannot be enforced because of a legal technicality such as failure to comply with statutory requirements. For real estate professionals, recognizing these distinctions can help prevent disputes and guide clients toward legally sound agreements that will withstand legal scrutiny. Online discussion. 1. Question: why is it important for real estate professionals to understand the difference between a void and a voidable contract? Answer: understanding the difference helps agents identify whether a contract can be enforced or canceled. A void contract has no legal effect from the beginning, while a voidable contract remains valid unless the affected party chooses to cancel it. 2. Question: how might a verbal agreement to sell property become unenforceable under Arizona law? Answer: Arizona law requires contracts involving the sale of real property to be in writing under the statute of frauds. If the agreement is not documented in writing, it may be considered unenforceable even if the parties verbally agreed to the terms. 3. Question: why might a contract involving fraud be considered voidable rather than void? Answer: a contract involving fraud may still be valid initially, but the injured party has the right to cancel the agreement once the fraud is discovered. This gives the affected party the choice to either rescind the contract or continue with the transaction.